So hello everybody, welcome to Kaju Samyuzong Edinburgh on this very meaningful day because, well, it's full moon. First of all, it's full moon, and full moon in the Buddhist way of view is a very, very good time to be doing Dharma practice. So it also happens to be our last day of this semester. So this is the last teaching till we come back in January. And and it's also the final part of the course that we've been doing for the last few months on the Four Noble Truths. And I can't think of a more appropriate teaching for a full moon and the last day as the teachings of the Buddha, the precious teachings of the Buddha. And so yes, I feel that we're in tune. So let's start off our session by reciting the refuge prayer, refuge and bodhicitta. So we say that, we'll say it once in the English and then twice in the Tibetan phonetics. And then the one underneath it, the four immeasurables, we'll just say that once in English and once in the Tibetan phonetics. We say the Tibetan just to sort of make a strong link with the lineage. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the noblest Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the virtue generated by the practice of generosity and other virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. O Sanjay Chotang Suji Chonam La Chang Chopadu Dani Chapsunji Dagi Jinsoji Pe Sonamji Dola Pencher Sanjay De Parusho Sanjay Chotang Suji Chonam La Chang Chopadu Dani Chapsunji Dagi Jinso Jipe Sonamji Dala Penche Sanjay Parsho. May all beings be happy and create the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness that can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal, impartial compassion, free of bias to friends or enemies. O Sam Chen Tam Che Dewa Tang, Dewe Jatan Dempa Jochik, Dunyao Tang, Dunyao Chi Jutan Chalwa Jochik, Dunyao Me Pe Dewa Tampa Tang, Mindralwa Jochik, Niring Chadang Tang Chalwe Tang Yom Chempola Nepa Jorchik. Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dagi Chiwo Pende De Shukla Katrin Chempo Gune Jesungte Kusung Tuchi Nyodrup Saltu Sol. Okay, so you can put these to one side for the time being, but not on the floor, not on the floor. Just put it on a chair or a table behind you. And you can put it on a chair behind you so they don't fall off, or to one side. Okay, that's fine. So, the Four Noble Truths. I think one or two of you weren't at the previous teaching. Is there anybody who wasn't at the previous teaching? Oh, okay. So, to really get a good understanding, you have to do all four of them. You have to have read and studied all four of them. There are many versions of the Four Noble Truths because they're translated from the Buddha's teachings, and so it depends on the lineage of whoever's translated it and the teacher. But we're very, very fortunate to have this version, which is based on the teachings of the Buddha, but through the eyes of a highly, fully enlightened master called Rinchen Khandro Rinpoche, who was a Vajrayana practitioner and great master, great scholar. He is probably unique in having been the teacher of the 16th Karmapa and also the teacher of the 17th Karmapa. I can't think of anyone else who would I could say that about. So his view is extremely deep and extremely high, but it's also very, very well expressed, simply expressed. So to really get a good grasp, you really do need to go to the beginning. Fortunately, you can do that because we've been filming these teachings, so you can see. Although there's 4 Noble Truths, we've split it into 3 parts. So the first one, let me just introduce it a bit. The truth of, so in the first Noble Truth, that dealt with the acceptance of the fact that worldly life is full of suffering. And we look at that. We really look at that. We look in depth at that, at this suffering. And then to get even deeper, the second Noble Truth is the causes of suffering. So we know that there is suffering, then we have to understand, well, why? What's the cause? What are the causes of this? And that's a very, very profound examination. Because what we're doing is examining ourselves here. Because everything we experience is through our mind, and so that's where the sufferings originate, not from outside, from our mind. And then the third one, the last one that we did is so we look at the suffering, the cause of suffering, and then the cessation of suffering. Is it possible to stop this suffering or to get out of it, to escape this suffering? And we looked at that, how that could come about. And that talked a lot about karma, but about many other things as well. So obviously there's no time, I'm not going to reiterate the entire subjects, but I'm just giving you a little list of them. So those are the previous 3. So now today, we're on the 4th Noble Truth, which is the truth of the path. So they all follow on, one from another. So when we looked at how to get out of suffering, it led to the path. And we're extremely fortunate because the Buddha gave us that path. He gave us the way out of this suffering. Of course, he couldn't wave a magic wand and get you out of suffering. It's something we all have to do for ourselves. And if we carry on with this sort of idea of a path, then we have to travel it. You can't just send someone in advance and say, well, you do it for me. It's not the way it works. We have to do it ourselves. So that's where we're up to right now. And so it's the path is the path that leads us out of the sufferings of samsara, of worldly suffering. Samsara really means the cyclic sort of hamster wheel of just not learning from our own mistakes and continually falling prey to them. So samsara, basically, it's that. Or you could say mistaken views. And so the way out of that is through our own effort, our own understanding, our own insight. We have to cultivate our insight and to the ultimate goal of realizing our true nature. Who we truly are. That's what it's about. Because right now we don't know ourselves. We don't know who we are. We don't really know. And that's why, we end up suffering. So on this path, there are different stages. It's not like you just, there you go from A to Z straight away. You could, if you take the metaphor of a physical journey, you could say there are stages along the path. It's all going towards realizing your true nature, i.e. become your Buddha nature. But to get there, you can't just go zoom like that. You have to go gradually, because it's the most difficult thing you could ever do, but it's also the most meaningful thing you could ever do, beside which all else pales. Other journeys just pale into insignificance. So there are 5 main stages, or they're called the paths, but I think stages makes it easier to understand. So the path or the stage of, the first one is, I'll just list them, and then we'll go into them in detail. So the first one is the path or the stage of accumulation. The second one is the path or the stage of junction. The third is the path or stage of insight. The fourth is the path or the stage of cultivation. And the fifth one is the path or the stage of no more study. That is accomplishment. In truth, it's you're there. So, that's a very rough précis. And now let's get into it in some detail. So I'm going to... Actually, what I'm going to do, I think it might be helpful if I, before we get straight into it, I'm going to read the preceding paragraph. It was, I can't remember if I read it, but it's the last paragraph in the third Noble Truth, which is that of cessation, and then it sort of segues into the fourth Noble Truth. I think it would be helpful to do that. So he's talking about eradicating the defilements. Eradicating the defilements is the mistaken views, the obstacles in our way through mistakes, or ignorance, you could say. So we have to eradicate the defilements, and ultimately that comes down to a belief in self. Very difficult to not believe in self when in modern life everything is saying yourself is the most important thing, you're number one, you've got to, everything like that. So not just this life but many lifetimes. You see how it grows arms and legs, doesn't it? It's not easy to understand straight away. Anyway, if one follows through the path, then we will eventually come to realize the wisdom of non-self. Through understanding the absence of an ego self, one no longer creates the defilements and bad actions and brings to an end that whole process of sort of making more negative karma. And this is highly possible to reach. Therefore, there is the third Noble Truth of cessation. So, the very essence and nature of cessation is peace. Sometimes people think of Buddhahood in terms of brilliant insights or something very spectacular. In fact, the peace one obtains from the cessation of everything unhealthy is the deepest happiness, bliss, and well-being. It's not all fireworks, bright lights. The deepest bliss and well-being, its very nature is lasting, in contrast to worldly happiness, which is extremely transitory. In contrast, this ultimate liberation and omniscience of cessation is the most deeply moving peace. And within that peace, all the powers of liberation and wisdom are developed. Everything's quietened down. There's no more white noise. Peace. And through that, realization can blossom. It's the opposite of our modern way of living, isn't it? When it's more stuff bombarding you all the time, more noise. I suppose it's always been like that, but it seems even more so now. There are more ways of bombarding. It is a very definitive release from both suffering and its results, and is definitive release from the defilements which are the cause of suffering. There are 4 main qualities of this truth of cessation. First, it is the cessation of suffering. Second, it is peace. Third, it is the deepest liberation and wisdom. Fourth, it is a very definitive release. It doesn't come and go. That's it. Cessation is a product of practicing the path shown to us by the most perfect one, the Buddha. And the actual nature of that path is the topic of the Fourth Noble Truth, which is called the truth of the path because it describes the path that leads to liberation. Okay, so that was the sort of link into this next part of the Fourth Noble Truth. So we're going to look at the different stages along the path. So the Fourth Noble Truth is called the truth of the path because a path leads to one's ultimate goal. One does this step by step, stage by stage, progressively completing one's journey. You can't miss bits out. You have to go through the whole process. You can't take shortcuts. Because we're talking about understanding, developing our intelligence and understanding, wisdom, compassion, all the good qualities. So the main stages of Buddhism are called the 5 paths or stages because by progressively traversing them, one eventually reaches one's destination, which is cessation of suffering that then allows one's true nature to blossom. This path of the Buddha can be analysed through its 5 main stages, which are called the 5 paths, and then he lists them, but I've already listed them. But he does end with the last one saying, properly speaking, the first 4 of these are the path, with the 5th one being the effect or the result. That is when you're there, basically. So the first path is called the path of accumulation, because gathering or accumulating a great wealth of many things, this is the stage in which one tries to gather all the positive factors which enable one to progress. It's as if, if you were setting out on a journey, you can't just set out without any preparation, can you? If you're a physical journey, you need to get equipment, you might need food to take with you, you've got all sorts of things you might have to do. Make sure you've got everything that you need for that journey in order to safely make that journey and to get to the next stage of it. So this is, that's the physical way of doing it, but when we're talking about our mind, it's our mind that we have to prepare. It's not as much a matter of things. So how do we do that? We need to gather all the positive factors which enable us to progress. So one tries to cultivate diligence. We're going to need a lot of diligence. It's not just about knowing it and then think, right, well, I've done that, I know about that, tick. You have to apply it. You can read about it, that's not going to get you anywhere. The start, it's a glimpse, but you have to be treading the path. So one tries to cultivate diligence. Now, we can only cultivate what we already have something of, isn't it? It's not like we have to go and get, where do I get my diligence from? I'll go and buy it from the shop or something, or read a book about diligence and then that. No, we already have the ability. So all of the things that we're trying to do here is to hone and cultivate what we already have. A lot of what we do in modern life cultivates the opposite. It cultivates our less good qualities, let's say, our negative side. Very often, the thing is that the culture that we live in is makes use of making us inadequate. Because if we feel inadequate, we buy stuff to make us feel adequate, and that's what the capitalism is based on, isn't it? So this is completely the opposite. It was saying is, you've got the seeds of everything, but you do need to cultivate. Provide the right conditions. It's like, if you're planting seeds, okay, you've got the perfect seeds, but they need water, they need sunlight, they need tending, they need care, they need diligence. It's not any good just to do it once every blue moon and then hope for the best. Diligence means that you keep at it, you know. So one tries to cultivate diligence, the good qualities and the wisdom which penetrates more deeply into the meaning of things. So you really need to use your brain here. You need to use your intelligence that can penetrate and look into the meaning of things and not just accept them. Even though the Buddha said them, you need to understand them for yourself on a deep level. Otherwise, it's just like, you know, you read something and it's here today and gone tomorrow. It's not penetrated you because you've not penetrated the meaning, or we haven't penetrated. So when we penetrate the meaning, then it's like we eat it, we absorb it, we take it on board, and then we can apply it. Because just knowing about something isn't enough. You have to use it, isn't it? You might know a lot of things, but if, for example, if you're a singer, you might know a lot of songs, but if you don't sing them, what's the point? You're not using them, so you just got gathering dust on the shelf. So one commits oneself to accumulate. One commits oneself to accumulate all the various positive aspects of practice. So there's a commitment here. Without that, it's going to be come and go, isn't it? So you have to commit in your mind. You don't necessarily have to commit to somebody else, although that might help. But definitely you need to make a commitment in your mind that this is what you want to do. This is what you think is the right way, and then keep to it. Otherwise it'll come and go, because there are so many negative influences that will knock you off the path if they can. And they are far more numerous, and they've been going for a long time in our lives, you know. So we have to be realistic about it. And not just this life, but many other lives as well. So it's not easy. So, but if you're really looking deeply into things, and then you see the importance of it, the incomparable meaning of it, you know, that everything else is like, it's kind of like not much good really. It's not saying that you shouldn't do anything else, but where you put your effort, you know, where you really put your effort. So one gathers the positive elements into one's life, into one's being, while at the same time working on many different ways to remove all the unwanted elements from one's life. It's like we're caught in a bit of a web, you know, and there's a lot of obstacles in the way, pretty much of our own making, but sometimes it can be conditions as well. But all of it, you know, if you look at the way of cessation, then ultimately it does come down to us. So we need to understand all those negative things as well, because when we understand them for what they are, then they fall away. But to do that, then that's when you need to use, again, the deep contemplation, the deep understanding. It's only through that you think, what was I doing that for? You know? Why was I so stupid? Or why was I... Not to beat yourself up, but through that understanding, it falls away. Once you know, if you take an example of a child and you tell them not to put their hand in the fire, and they still do it. But once they put their hand in the fire, then they get it, you know. So that's just an analogy, but you have to really get it in order to drop it, you know, to think that's not a good thing to do. It's causing obstacles in my way. So they are self-caused through our not understanding, through our ignorance. And that's what we need to peel away in order to clear the path. So we commit ourselves to accumulate all the positive aspects of practice, and at the same time gathers the positive elements into our being, at the same time working on many different ways to remove all the unwanted elements from one's life. One also applies various techniques to eliminate the various blockages and obstacles which are holding one back. So this is called a stage of accumulation because one engages in this manifold activity of letting go of what's harmful and gathering and cultivating what's helpful. When we uproot all the negative, selfish defilements that hinder our progress and bring together all the positive conditions, then that makes our you could say purification and transformation possible. So we're working on ourselves. We don't, as I said before, you don't need to bring stuff from the outside. Of course, you need to study, you need to apply the wisdom of that study, but you need to really contemplate and then you also need to meditate. That's the practice, to familiarize yourself with it, to go deep. So it's not just on a superficial level, like most sort of worldly learning is kind of academic. I'm not dissing academic learning, it's very helpful as well, but it doesn't enter into your being in the same way, you know. It's with the mind that we're dealing, and the mind is the problematic, but it's also where all the solutions are as well. So it depends how we use it. And really, whatever, I think, you know, when we look at something that's negative in ourselves, and we see it for what it is, like we see that it's an obstacle, it's holding us back. We see that whatever that way of being, which is not a wise way of being, which is a negative way of being, once we really see that it's holding us back, it's an obstacle, then kind of with that understanding, and you have to kind of familiarize. It's not just enough to think, oh yeah, and then that's it. No, you have to keep plugging away, because you've got many, many lifetimes of sort of being under the sway of that. You know, so it's not gone in an instant. It's not instant coffee. You have to kind of really, really get familiar with why. You know, why that's how that works, and oh, why did I do that? You know, and then when you've really got it, it sort of just falls away. You know, it has transformed into an understanding. Where there was ignorance, there is now wisdom. The ignorance has become wisdom. It's not that you have to go and, oh, well, I'm going to part the ignorance, I'll go and get some wisdom. It becomes wisdom through understanding. What was once a mistaken view becomes an unmistaken view. Therefore, the way is clear. I think that's how it happens. So, because one engages in all this activity of relinquishing what's harmful, practicing what's helpful, we gather all these things into, or we gather, or we can say we can cultivate. I think cultivate works for me better, because that suggests that we already have them in their seed form, so it's a matter of cultivating them. And so in ordinary life, in our day-to-day ordinary worldly life, we're caught up in the level of worldliness. So even though we don't want to be, we're still operating on this level of conditioned existence, because that's the way the world is going, isn't it? We're in the world, we may not be of it, but we're in it. And we're still under the influence of the defilements, which have a very strong habitual grip on our existence, and we need to come to terms with that. It's not easy. We need to get rid of these defilements in order to find our way out of samsara. I get the sort of picture of, you know, it was in Snow White or something, when all the forest starts to kind of, you know, she's like completely enveloped by the branches of the forest. It's sort of like that, you know. Well, I mean, a bit. So we need to get rid of these defilements in order to find our way out of samsara. That's the only way. We have to relinquish these defilements. Of course, we want to find this peace and happiness, and we know it's possible, but even with the strongest will in the world, we can't do it overnight. It's not a quick fix. It took many lifetimes to get this confused. It's probably take a few to get unconfused. So first of all, in order to gain the good qualities, or to allow them to blossom, we need to work on creating all the different conditions which will make those qualities that we have, make them emerge. To within develop the various insights of meditation and real wisdom, we need to develop great faith and confidence in the validity and usefulness of that wisdom. We need to be convinced of this, otherwise we won't keep up with it. We have to see, wow, this really means something, you know, this makes sense to me. This is the way I want to go. You know, not wishy-washy about it. This makes absolute sense. So that's why we really need to examine it, so we can say that with absolute conviction. Once we are convinced of its value, we need to change our habits so that we have the diligence to do all the things necessary to make insight and wisdom emerge, or blossom, you could say. Therefore, there are many factors and conditions we must generate within our life that will bring about our happiness. The great thing is, it's in our hands. We know it's possible because the Buddha and many others have done this. So we definitely know it's possible. And we know that we have the wherewithal. So, to remove all the unwholesome negative factors binding us in samsara, we must uproot, and this is tricky, this is the hard bit, we must uproot a belief in the self. This self that we've been indoctrinated with since since beginningless time, that's how ingrained it is, this mistaken view of a self. It's very hard to uproot that. So we must uproot a belief in the self, eliminate the various defilements which are hindering us, and bring together the many different conditions that make this transformation and purification possible. It's very hard. It's very, we always think of ourselves, Of course, I'll tell you the way I think about it. So this is now not very much not the Buddha speaking or Thrangu Rinpoche, but maybe some way of helping, or maybe not. We need to have a view of a very, very broad view, and to understand something about countless lifetimes, from beginningless time to endless time. So there's no beginning, no end. And existence, our existence, all existence takes place within that endless time, which it isn't even, you can't really even apply the word time, because time is like a man-made framework. It's a sort of parameters of some kind that we invent so that we can meet each other at the same time, go and have our cup of coffee, and we don't miss each other and all of that. It's a convenience, but it has no true actual existence, something called time. Bear in mind, this is me talking here, not anything else. But in terms of a self, I find it, one image I have in my mind is like, if you're looking at the ocean and you see this wave coming up, and it's sometimes a very big wave, and it's forming, and it's forming, and it's this beautiful wave, and then it starts to subside, and off it goes. Something like that. So for a brief moment in time, that wave was a wave. It came out of the ocean, and it formed into what we call a wave, and then it went back into the ocean. So I think of the self as something like that. It has an appearance for a lifetime. The appearance is in a body. It's got a house. It lives in a body, this appearance. But the mind within that house is not a physical thing, is it? The mind, you cannot say, you can't hold your mind, you can't touch your mind, it's not physical. But it's housed in something which is physical, and we each have a separate one. Like a wave that's that wave, and there's that wave, and there's that. So we all have a momentary lifetime, and then multiple of them. So multiple waves we've been and are, and sometimes we're in maybe one part of the world, and they're just a little soft wave, and another time it might be a big wave, and whatever. They have appearances, don't they? So for me, that metaphor helps me to understand no self, because ultimately the wave is just a momentary appearance, and then it dissolves back into its source. It is only a metaphor, but I found it helpful, and maybe you will, I don't know. Anyway, so for that reason, the purpose of this stage of accumulation is to complete all the necessary conditions by gathering them into our existence. So everything that we know to be useful and helpful, we cultivate. Everything we know and we discover to be unhelpful and obstacles, we let go of. And the best way to let go of it is through understanding it, because otherwise it'll just come back and bite you on the bum again at some other time. It's only through understanding that we can definitively get rid of it. It's like the bubbles popped. We're no longer under the thrall of the Buddha, the Buddha, or even the Buddha actually. So we're completely free of all ideas about the Buddha, because they won't be right either, so if we're not seeing clearly. Okay, so that's something about the path of accumulation. Then the second part of the path is, so we've gathered these positive conditions and we're working with them. Then the second part is called the path of junction. So the path of junction is what links the path of accumulation, the previous one, to the next one, which is the path of insight. So in between the path of accumulation and the path of insight is this path of junction, where they kind of meet. And it's the interim stage where our inner qualities that we are cultivating and our understanding begins to link up with the truth of how things really are, how they truly are, and that is the path of insight. But you don't just go, oh, you're ignorant, now you know everything, and that's that. No. So it takes time, it takes effort. So that interim part of the path is called the path of junction. It's not like a physical junction where you were there and then you got to the crossroad and then you carried on and that was the junction. No, this junction takes time. It might take many lifetimes, because you're engaged in the most profound work, most profound and meaningful work on yourself, in order to develop and allow your Buddha nature to shine through. So that's the path of accumulation. The path of where it meets the path of junction, sorry. So here, inner realization, the way we can perceive things begins to link up with the actual nature of phenomena. The way we're perceiving is now linking up with, not with how we thought it was, but with how it truly is. So it's a kind of aligning. So we're getting released from the deluded ways of seeing, and we're starting to open up the true way of seeing, the true way of understanding. But it takes time. It's not, Rome wasn't built in a day. And so here our inner realization, the very way we can perceive things begins to link up with the actual nature of phenomena, because we are gathering all the favorable circumstances that will eventually lead us to the actual insight itself. So we're still gathering all the qualities, but we're getting closer and closer, and that all takes place within this stage of junction, you could say. It might take many lifetimes, I don't know. It doesn't give a timeline about it. It's down to us. Milarepa reached enlightenment in one life. Well, we say that, but we don't know how many lives it took him to get to that stage. So maybe scrap that. But you hear that often about Milarepa. I think it's because he did do a lot of journey from a seemingly difficult stage right through to enlightenment in one life. Okay, so then that brings us to the next path, which is the path of insight. And in this, we develop our understanding through our practice of study, contemplation, meditation, and application. Otherwise, it stays theoretical. If we don't use it, it's like some subject that we're studying to get a degree or something. We have to use it. We have to use it on ourselves. That's what it's for. If you see that you're dirty, and you think, right, well, I'll get some bubble bath, and I'll get some soap, and I'll run a nice hot bath, but then you don't get in the bath, you're not going to get clean, are you? Anyway, So this when we attain this insight into the way things really are, and it develops beyond the level of delusion and mistaking views, when we're in that space, we realize that there is no self. At this point, we have now realized that that was a mistaken way. We're not just something we'd read, but we'd actually realized that understanding. Oh, So once there's no longer a belief, a mistaken belief in a self, then there are no longer any root defilements that mistaken belief initiates, i.e. attachment, aggression, mental darkness associated with the idea of self, greed, pride, all the things that one does to bolster up this ego that doesn't actually exist unless we create it ourselves. So once there are no longer any defilements, then one doesn't do anything unvirtuous or negative, because it would be ridiculous. Why would you? You've seen the truth of things. So when you know that you're not bolstering up this precious self, I this and I that, I must have this and this must be satisfied at all costs, when that's not there, then you're open to a whole new way of understanding and therefore behaving, because you don't have to bolster it up, this egotistical, egocentric way of seeing things, everything. And so there are no more defilements, and so you don't do anything negative again, because that would be completely against everything that you've understood. Why would you? You just wouldn't. And then if you're not doing anything that's unvirtuous, no more suffering. No more suffering. Because there's nothing, you're not doing anything that causes the suffering anymore. Now, it's true that once we have that insight, all suffering is immediately removed. But in another way, it's not true. This is because the delusion of a self is a habit which has been built up for such a long time, and it's very, very hard to remove. Not impossible, but very, very hard. For example, when we believe in the self, when we're still under the thrall of thinking that we are a self, and we hit our finger with a hammer, it hurts. Even when we have realized that an unchanging self is just a delusion, we might realize that, and just a delusion fabricated by our minds, so we realize that, but still, when we hit our finger with a hammer, it still hurts. Somebody sent me this thing just a couple of days ago, and it was it was just a sort of little, it was a riff on this actually. It was kind of like, so the Buddha says there is no self. So whose is this arthritis? Yeah. So, well, it's similar. It's, if you're hitting your finger with a hammer, we still have this feeling. I'm suffering. We're still suffering. Because there is an enduring, built-up association of I with the flesh of our body, all throughout our lifetime. Ouch, that hurts, And not only this lifetime, but countless lifetimes. That's the way it's been. Removal of that long-established conditioning of self is carried out through a long process of accustomization to the truth of non-self. This is the fourth stage of the cultivation of insight. So that's the fourth. That's brought us to the fourth part of the path, which is the cultivation. Because, okay, you've realized it, you can see it quite clearly, but you still feel attached to this body, and you still feel pain, and you still, behave, even though you've understood on some level. But there's been so many lifetimes of attachment and conditioning that you can't just drop it, even though you've understood it. I guess it's a bit like addiction, isn't it? You might understand that it's not a good idea to take heroin or something, but if you've been addicted for many years, you can't just drop it. You have to come off it gradually, and then maybe have a substitute, and then you come off that, and eventually you can get clean of it. But it's hard, and that's just a relatively simple thing like heroin, which is this nowhere near as powerful as the conditioning of a self, an idea of self. So don't beat yourself up if you don't get it straight away. We still have the feeling, I am suffering, because there's this enduring built-up association of I with the flesh of our body. Removal of that long-established conditioning of self is carried out through a long process of accustomization to the truth of non-self. It's not quick. It takes time. And this is the fourth stage of the cultivation of insight. So you've got the insight, but you need to cultivate it. You need to really familiarize yourself. You need to really take it on board. Not just theoretically, or abstract way, but actually so it permeates your whole being. And so that brings us to the fourth stage, or path, called the path of cultivation. So the path of insight, we developed our understanding through the practice of study, contemplation, meditation and application in order to uproot our mistaken views of self and its attendant root defilements so that our unvirtuous actions cease and unmistaken insight is developed. And then the path of cultivation, insight realized it until it becomes instilled deeply, unmistakenly, and thereby even the finest traces of wrong view are removed, and we are approaching our goal. So in Tibetan, the word gom, you know the word gompa? Gompa means a temple or place where you meditate, a place where you become familiar with. It's got this cultivation, this meditation, but it's familiar in the sense of getting used to something, because you've gone from this sort of deeply ingrained, deluded way of seeing to suddenly, well, maybe not suddenly, but realizing something completely different, opposite even, you know. That'll take some getting used to, for it to really take hold, to really, you know, like it's like eating it or something. You're absorbing it. You fully not just understand it intellectually, but with your whole being. You take it on board. Get used to something. This is what the word gom means, to accustom oneself. And this is why it is translated here as the path of cultivation. Sometimes it's translated as the path of meditation. They're kind of almost synonymous, because it's through meditation that you cultivate, that you absorb, you take on board, you eat, kind of mentally eat. But this stage is the idea of getting used to the insight into the nature of things. It is the stage of getting used to the insight into the nature of things. You're becoming more and more familiar with the truth of things. And through this familiarity, we can remove the very fine traces of defilements and subconscious conditioning that still exists. So it's like you've got rid of the main. If you're, you know, polishing something, or you say you have this jewel and it's encrusted in grime, so you got rid of all of that, but there still needs a little bit of polishing, you know, because there's still the odd little flaw, and so that's the stage that we're at now. Even the finest traces, and so we can remove these traces of defilements and subconscious conditioning that still exist. Through gradually working on these, the goal of Buddhahood will be attained. We're almost there, but not quite. And so the way to do that is through keeping at it, keep polishing, keep cultivating, keep getting familiar, keep getting used to it. It's in your very being. So that is what we're talking about. We're just going through, this is like a little sort of list of things to do, but it takes place over lifetimes. So don't think, I've been 2 weeks doing that stage and I'm still not, because we're very impatient. We want it, and we want it now, because all our whole way of being is we want, and I want this, and I must have it now. I want coffee, I want it now. Well, it might take a bit longer for enlightenment, to reach your Buddha nature, but it's the only really worthwhile goal there is, because the rest is diluted. So you might as well get on with it. That's actually why I became ordained. I remember thinking I might as well get on with it then. Not that you have to be ordained, but it can be helpful. Okay, so through gradually working on these, the goal of Buddhahood will be attained. So through the cultivation of insight, we eventually reach the goal of the fifth path, which is called the path of no more study. Thank God for that. No, but because you realised it all. So now you're totally aligned. There's no difference. You are one with Buddha because you are Buddha. So through cultivation, we remove even the most subtle causes of suffering, even the minute traces. And once this is completed, we have reached the highest state. And there are no more new paths to go along, making this the path of no more study or no more practice, you could say. Because you are synonymous. There's no difference between you and the path. You're there. So everything you do, you might still be in a human body and you might still be having, in whichever lifetime it is that you attain this, so you still be in the relative world and all of that's going on. But whatever you do will automatically be positive and be, because it's coming from a place of complete understanding. So there will be no more selfish, we'll not be capable of doing any more selfish thing because you see that is a ridiculous thing to do. So, yeah, you'll be Buddha. You still have a body. So basically the path of no more practice, it's sort of not really the path anymore. We've reached our destination. We are at one with the practice. We have reached Buddhahood. This is the result. So that's it. Now, I think I need to just summarize this whole thing, because it's one thing to read through it and talk about it a little bit, but we're talking about the most profound thing you could possibly do with your life, any life. So what we've just talked about today and in the previous courses, it's just like a whistle-stop tour, of the Four Noble Truths, the most profound truths. From the first truth of the worldly sufferings of samsara, the second truth of the causes of suffering, and the third truth of the possible cessation of suffering, and the fourth truth of the path and all the stages along the path that we need to reach our goal of revealing our true Buddha nature. So, but the timeline of actually doing it is somewhat different. So it's like we've just had a glimpse of a map. You haven't had a glimpse of the doing, because you can't glimpse doing, you have to do doing, but you can have a glimpse of the map. So I feel that's what these last few sessions have been, just to have some sense, some glimpse of where we're going and how we might get there. And to reach the goal of revealing our Buddha nature, we have glimpsed the map of our journey to Buddhahood, but it will take many lifetimes to accomplish. Or maybe not so many. Maybe I'm sitting in a room full of Milarepas here. But it depends on us. How long it takes depends on us, isn't it? How much effort we put in. But at least we've seen the map. And of course, it's all very well. Today we've been thinking and talking about being fully enlightened, but we have to start from where we are now. There's no use trying to skip ahead. That's not the way it works. You have to be very, very realistic about where you are now. And that means getting rid of a lot of wrong ideas about yourself and about the world in general. So, but of course we are very attached to our ideas, aren't we? We're very attached to our way of thinking. We think we know it all. It's taken, we're adults after all. So we really have to just let go all that ego egotistical way of thinking, and that is not easy. So be prepared to roll your sleeves up, and we have to start where we are now, right now. I mean, of course, we can say that right now we're in this temple, we're listening to the Dharma. We must have some good karma, and karma is not accidental. It's because of who we are and what we've done. So we have some things on us. We've come some way, and here we are, and we're listening to this on a very auspicious day as well. So whether we use it or not, whether we make use of it or not, it's up to us. Nobody can do it for you, that's for sure. But first you need to know that it's possible. So we've seen the map, we know where we are now, we have to start from where we are now. And otherwise we're just fooling ourselves. We sort of in la la land, oh yes, it sounds wonderful, but oh yes, let's go. It's nitty gritty, dealing with all your little foibles and your little hidden corners and crannies of sort of mistaken views. But the relief when you start to chip away at that and things get a bit lighter and you start to see a little bit more. It's only the ego that's clinging on, that's stopping you. That's the enemy in the camp here. But so that's what we have to gradually chip away at, and then things start to lighten up. So these precious truths are the Buddha of the Buddha. I mean, we're so fortunate to know about this. These are the lamp that lights our way. Without them, I don't know where we'd be. But we have the map, we have the lamp that lights our way. But now it's up to us to apply them. And remember at the beginning, we need diligence, perseverance. We're in Leith, that's the motto, is persevering, so we're in a good place. But it's up to us. So that's really it for that. But I think we should finish without words and just let things sink in a bit. So we'll just sit up and meditate for a little while. If you need to have a stretch first, feel free. If you're sitting on a chair, bring your bottom forward so you're not leaning on the back of the chair. Plant your feet firmly on the ground, shoulder width apart. If you bring your bum forward, then your feet will definitely touch the ground. And if you're sitting on a cushion, you just, whether you're on the cushion or on a chair, straighten up the back. Probably if you're sitting on a chair, because of the arms on the chair, it's probably best to have your hands just resting on your knees, just open up. Yeah, just resting naturally. And yeah. And you can also do that if you're sitting on the floor, or you can do this. And you need to keep your eyes open as well, because otherwise you'll get sleepy and then that's not going to help. So you need to keep your eyes slightly open. You might want to take your glasses off because you're not going to be using your eyes, but I definitely recommend keeping them slightly open, because the way to take on board this is, through contemplation and meditation. We need to be fully alert. Relaxed, yes, absolutely. Mentally and physically relaxed, but fully alert, fully switched on. So sharpen your awareness. Turn it inwardly. So it's not, even though your eyes are open, you're not particularly concentrating on anything outside. You're using your inner eye. In fact, you're not really using your eyes, your physical eyes. You're using your inner eye to contemplate the contents of your mind. So what we've been talking about today. But first of all, just relax, let everything settle. Let the noise die down. If you like, you can think about your breath, concentrate on your breath for a little while just to help you settle, noticing it, just breathing normally, noticing the air coming in through the nose, down into the lungs, and the diaphragm, the belly filling with air as well, holding for a few seconds, and then letting go, fully letting go, fully inhaling, holding, and fully letting go. So just breathing like that, fully, that automatically slows down the breathing and also slows down the mind. It kind of goes to a deeper level. Not just skittering about on the surface, but going deeper. Just resting body and mind together, here and now. So without carrying all the past with you, all your luggage, you don't need that. And without planning ahead to the future, you don't need that. You're just being here, but fully present, in the present. Resting without any expectation or agenda. Just allowing your mind to settle in its natural state. And when thoughts or feelings start to arise, just direct them towards what we've been discussing and looking into today, or any of the Four Noble Truths, but particularly the one that we've been doing today, to see for yourself how and what that means. How does it apply to you in your life this time? How does it apply and how does it work for you? What do you understand? What do you not yet understand? Look deeper. And if you start to feel a bit tight with it, then just let go again and relax into just spacious awareness. And then when you start to have thoughts again, direct them towards the truth of the five paths of Four Noble Truths, whichever part of them you wish to explore, investigate, and ultimately assimilate. So that's it for today. Of course, it's not it really. But hopefully you can take something away in your mind and work with it. You know, we're coming up to the holiday time. Holiday, remember the word holiday comes from holy days. So in amongst all the busyness and, you know, pleasure with families and whatever, try to take some time to practice. Otherwise, it's only ever going to be theory. So if you just take 1 or 2 days to retreat. You know, you can do a 1-day retreat, and then other days just do a small amount of practice and do 1 full day retreat. Maybe try that. Whatever you can manage. But it's going to take perseverance, we know that, and diligence. You have to retreat to advance. So I hope you can use what we've been doing and go through it again. Now it's online as well, so you can refresh your mind if you didn't take notes or anything like that. So at least you can recap that way. But you know, take it on board and use it. That's what it's for. Okay, so we'll just end our session by dedicating the merit of our practice. So prayer on the bottom of the page. So we share the merit of this practice with all sentient beings. Through the wholesomeness of this practice, may all mental defilements be overcome, and may all beings be liberated from the ocean of samsara, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness and death. Sanam di tamche sekpani, topne nirpe dranam pamcheni, jigana chi bala trukpai, sipe sole doa sho. When we read these prayers after the session that we did, it makes them even more meaningful, doesn't it? We talk about, may all the mental defilements be overcome. It's fresh in our mind, you know. When you say these prayers at the beginning and end of each session, really think about what you're saying. You know, they're very, very condensed. And because we say them often, there's a danger they can become sort of like automatic pilot. So say them slowly and think about them as you're saying. And practice them, of course. Okay, that's it. So, I'll preempt Happy New Year by saying Happy New Year now. And yeah, have a good holiday, have a good rest, and do some practice. And see you next year. See you in 2025.